Okay, so in this update, pardon my voice, it's going to be a little bit fucked up. I had some food that didn't agree with me earlier, and I certainly paid the price, but this is the other reason why this is so late getting it done. It always bugs me a little bit. I know that I'm keeping up with the days, but I'm always just on the cusp of not having an update show up, and that drives me nuts. I'm really worried that at some point I'm just gonna fuck up and just stop. And I'm always worried about that because there's been other things that have fallen off by the wayside to make room for this, and it's been really weird. So wow, I had like 5 or 6 different ideas pop into my head right at the same time. I was like, what? First one was, I don't know how you guys deal with, if you go to therapy, I don't know how you guys deal with organization. But one of the challenges I always have is making sure that I have enough time to talk about whatever has been happening now, as well as things that have been happening in the past. It's really crazy. If anyone had told me that, and maybe this isn't for everybody, but for me, it's definitely almost like homework. I have to take the time to figure out, well, what's bugging me from back in the 80s to now. And that sounds a little bit, stupid, I guess, because, but trauma doesn't really go away, or issues or problems or memories. They linger, they stay. But I always find myself having a challenge whenever I go in for any kind of session and trying to talk about a problem. And sometimes they'll kind of bind together, and that's great, like, oh, well, this is why this is here and this sort of thing. I always hope that, if not for me, for other people in the future, that there will be some way that, if you're going to therapy, that your workplace and other things take it seriously. If you're needing this sort of thing, that it'll become more mainstream. And that's even a terrible thing to wish for, right? Because the need for therapy to become mainstream would mean that there would be a lot of issues that we had to work through, and that's not great. I don't want that to be the norm, but I do want it to be a norm that if people need to go, then it's available and people are understanding. I know that there's always a fine line to balance on that, but this whole week has been filled with all kinds of things. I don't know if it's because of the stuff I've been posting. I don't know if it's because of all the other things that I talk about. But moment after moment, it's been like I've been, recommended videos on stoicism, which I kind of understand. A few acquaintances of mine are very much, into that whole movement and idea, and that's great. I don't understand a lot of it, but I do appreciate a lot of what I've watched, if it's accurate information. I mean, it's YouTube, so, take everything with a grain of salt. And I've also seen a lot of things talking about the 40-hour work week and the 30-hour work week, and, the whole life-work balance, and does a job define you, and this sort of thing. These are not unfamiliar themes if you've followed this or anything I do. I'm always talking about it. I know that at some point in time, I probably have friends and family that are like, shut the fuck up. You talk about this shit all the time. Because it's important. It's one of those things that, it never leaves me, because a good chunk of my life was spent working as much as I possibly could. I lived underneath this whole idea that if I worked really hard, I'd see rewards. I'd be in the places I need to be. But it never really let anything in about, like, well, if you screw up, if you mess up something, if a job doesn't go right, if you're not a natural fit, what happens if you do work as hard as you can and it just doesn't work out? There are a multitude of variables all along the way. And on the flip side, there have been people I've known who have hired people who have said, I was a great boss, I did this and all these other things, and my employees were just crap. That's true. I worked with plenty of people that I wouldn't give you $1 for. They're just terrible workers. So a lot of that's been on my mind. And then, the weather's been ridiculously cold around here, like stupid cold. But so I got a space heater on down here. The worst part is, I don't know if I'm going to notice during this recording or not, but my damn monitor on top is starting to go out. Now, one of the things that weirds me out about that is, great, I'm already in a tight budget area because I'm right between waiting to pay for shows and stuff if I get accepted. but I'm also reeling from, debts and first of the year taxes coming up and everything else like that. All this stuff rolling right around. I know that a lot of people would say, well, that's one of the problems with being a freelancer. And if you have a full-time job, this. I'm not really, that has nothing really to do with it. It's just, I think, I got into a little bit of a debate with somebody about that earlier. And I don't want to knock somebody having a full-time job or feeling that security in there. I've had these conversations before with clients, with friends, with family, ad nauseum. But there is always that thing in the back of my head that says, for a long time I gave everything I had. And then it led me into a path of disillusionment with where I was heading and what I was doing in life. That made it really hard for me to enjoy life. Thus, it made it really hard for me to take any job I had seriously, since I directly blamed those jobs I had for turning me into this really sort of unfeeling kind of lost person that was just, because it's not uncommon to talk about this sort of thing with people, but what I have often found as kind of a blowback, or maybe a pushback really, is that people will often, I've had circumstances where people are like, they're not comfortable talking about it because they don't want to talk about their job. They don't want to talk about where they've been in life, that sort of thing. And I imagine that that's all the reason why these things are showing up on my social media networks and stuff. Oh man. And it's also been hard too, because like I really kind of trashed. Saturday was just horrible. It was just a horrible day for me. I really tried hard. I don't know if I've been told this is an aspect of ADHD, but there have been times wherever I want to use something that is done. I'm going to use this little toy tank here. Okay. I got this when I was in 3rd grade. It's my original one. It really is. This is another little thing I found. I think I may have shown this before. The wheels are kind of jacked up. I wanted to know how it worked when I was a kid. And I think I jammed a bunch of dirt or something in here on accident trying to figure out exactly how the wheel worked. But when it used to roll, the turret would turn with a little sort of miller's wheel action down below. Kind of reminded me of like a bread grinding stone, set up like that. So what I end up feeling like is, let's say this is sitting here in front of me. And I know it's here. I'm aware of it. I know what it is. I can see it. Okay? What happens is, and this is the thing that I'm really trying to understand. I hope somebody else, I don't hope anyone else feels this, but if you have, please let me know what you think about this. I have all the intent of taking it from this hand and putting it down here on this table ledge in front of me. There are days when, if this represents my projects, personal, freelance, whatever I have, this is literally what happens. No matter how hard I try, no matter what I want to do, or maybe I even get a hold of it, it now weighs more. Or it gets away from me. It seems like the strangest thing. And I've spoken to a few people about it, and I can understand. For some people, it was rather uncomfortable to talk about that. I worry for myself, what is it going to take for me to overcome that? It used to be, whenever, especially like if I was working on site or something, 99% of the time, if I had something to do, I got it done. I didn't think about it either way. And I just plowed through. It didn't matter if it was training, it didn't matter what it was. I got through it the best I possibly could. And I often felt like I only absorbed 10 to 20% of what I was hearing. And I noticed, when that started happening, I was like, that's very different from when I was first starting out working. I was very adamant about what notes I took, how I was working on things, what I was doing. And I always felt like, okay, I think I've got my shit together here. And for the most part, I would kind of limp to the finish and do what I needed to do to get a job done. But I also felt like, man, I'm looking really red in this, because I'm wearing a red shirt. I always felt like there was something more that was amiss. And later, when I started reading about ADHD and all these other things, I started realizing that there's a good chance that I could have some problems here that I need to fucking figure out quickly, because the detriment has been horrible. There are days whenever, try as I may, this is the worst feeling in the world. I will often, no matter what time I wake up, no matter what time of day it is, if I have to work on something, I will go, and there's this thing, like an invisible barrier that blocks me, kind of like not being able to grab the toy tank. I won't be able to move. I find myself literally locked in place and unable to proceed. When I did other projects, and I talked about that book from the Brooklyn Art collection, and I would kind of go through it. I didn't think too much about it. And I had two recent things that I was working on. One is for a collaboration that I'm really looking forward to how it all comes about and everything. But it was doing a time lapse of an illustration, and I jumped into it like that. It was new, it was fresh, it was like boom. And there's other projects, along the way, but I was just trying to manage the time set on everything. But I was like, well, I've got to get this one at least started. And I did. I got a good start on it and everything else like that. Got it roughed out, got a good design going and everything. And I was like, okay, cool, that one's there. Now to go back to these other projects and do that. And each project and everything I've been doing, for a certain moment, I'm able to focus and be fine, and I can get through it just good. And just like when I talked about how I really wanted to get out of graphic design, and I am, it was one of those things where I felt like, well, shit, I can't focus, I'm not capable of accomplishing the things I can, and I'm very aware of it. And when that happens, there's a whole moment in my head where I wonder, why is that happening? Is it really burnout? Is it really me getting bored? Is it me just hating the work that I have? What is it? And I'm being honest. I'm not knocking a client or a project, not that. I'm just saying, am I ignoring that I'm changing? Because the truth is, even the most stalwart person changes at some point in time in their life. We always carry certain things about ourselves, and some people change radically and some people change ever so slightly. But I have to be mature enough as a creator, as a person really, to be able to admit, well, hey, this isn't working out. This isn't going to be the thing I need to carry me through for the rest of my life. And that has been something that, I, even in preparing for 2023, when I had said earlier, I'm taking a very low-key approach to this year. I wasn't joking. There are things I'm definitely going to reinterpret for myself, because in years past it was still very much like hustle culture. It was still very much get these things done, you're in a race against time. And here's the easiest way to put it. Have you guys seen the Pixar movie Soul? First of all, that movie is so on point. It's not even funny. It's one that when I watch it, I've only seen it 3 times. I wish I had been able to watch it in the theaters. They would have had to carry me out in a stretcher. I'm not fucking kidding you. Every single time I watch Soul, I can't help but get emotional. It is so beautiful, so underrated. And sure, everyone cries at Up. I did. Toy Story 3, devastating. Fucking devastating. Especially coming from somebody like me, big ass toy collector, man-child dude. And at the same time, there's plenty of others that have gotten me emotional like that, where I'm like, oh my God. But this was one where, because it spoke about music and being in the zone and the wonderful way that the writers at Pixar and the idea people there had put this together, and how everything just flowed into this grand work. And I'm not saying that the movie is perfect. I don't even really care if it is. It's a film that especially at the end. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen this movie. At the end of the movie, whenever he finally gets that evocative, life-changing moment to happen, and he plays his heart out, completely blows everyone away. Like he's just in that zone and in that moment. That is powerful. So are all the other moments too, where other people don't believe in him being anything more than like just, a part-time teacher. And then when he finally gets the job, the reluctance in his mindset of like, but this isn't the dream I have. This isn't where I want to be. This isn't the thing. Right? You've built this incredible castle out of dreams, imagination, expectations, and an overall sense of accomplishment. It's that whole thing of, the meadows are always greener on the other side of the fence. And I remember when I first watched it, and he gets to that point, he's played his heart out that night. And he's talking to the lead singer of the band. And that whole moment where he's like, I've been waiting for this my whole life. And it just didn't feel like he thought it was going to. And then that's when he realizes that was not what his spark was. It wasn't music. In the beginning, he could understand that. But it was wonderful how they wove out throughout the storytelling and the visuals especially, that in every avenue of life, music peppered into it. Rhythmic beats, how he saw the world, sure. But it still was something when he went back to his hall of memories and he saw what had happened to him and what his path, where it had taken him, and how it wasn't as brilliant or bright as he once thought it was. And I have never seen something give the dichotomy of, because it wasn't until the third time I watched it, what was his happiness? Well, he didn't really have any. His happiness was trying to be accepted as an incredible jazz pianist and join up with people and become part of this thing. And then he was picturing his name up in the lights and all these things, right? That can be a crazy addictive thing to want. And I believe that for most people, it's not what we want. We've all been there though, right? We all think we're going to be the next Walt Disney or the next whatever. We put our adulations onto these people that we look up to and we admire, and we almost imagine, rubbing elbows with them and being in the same project with them. And it's for some rarefied few people that does happen. For the majority of us, that's just not in the cards. That's just not possible. And I loved him. There was a moment in there whenever he falls back to earth and he accidentally ends up in the body of that cat. And I thought to myself, like when he comes back to his apartment and it's beautifully lit, just gorgeous. The lighting is stunning. The design of his little apartment there is beautiful. And it's just, you almost want to move in there, and the lighting is warm, and the light was cascading a rectangle down onto the ground. And he's a cat, and he walked in, and he was talking about they needed to switch their souls so he could get back in his body. And he walks into the sunbeam, and the cat part of him just overrides everything, and he collapses onto the floor, and he's so sleepy, and the sun's beaming down on him. It was such a wonderful moment because it was a play on the simplicity of happiness. And it went right back to, he really had everything he needed right there for that. That at its most base, he could find joy in what was around him that he didn't really normally enjoy. When the perspective changed and he was on a lower angle and he was a cat, he grew a completely different viewpoint of what his life was like. There are so many times, like even in the last couple, a video or two ago when it was just this last video when I was walking outside at 1 o'clock in the morning, right about now, in this cold ass weather out there, your perspective changes whenever you do anything. We know this. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. it changes how we will view life and what we're doing with it and where we're heading. And so later, whenever he realized, much to his chagrin after the show was done, that his spark was not the music, it was everything else that music pulled in around him. It was the memories of his father. It was his mother and her friends. It was the blue suit she had held on to. It was all of these things. It was the kids that believed in him and tried to believe in themselves and looked to him for guidance. It was every single element, down to the pizza slice, down to everything he enjoyed, that I think the vast majority of people, I know I am, are grossly unaware of how good something can be. I'm not saying everyone has a perfect life. I'm not saying everyone has a great life. I think I have a good life. Are there goals and things I want to do? Absolutely. But I know that I'm one of those kind of people that, because of what I'm going through, I often don't realize how good I have it, or what else I could do just by shifting a few paradigms to be able to focus again. And then, if that was the case, trying to grab this toy tank wouldn't be that hard. I know every single feeling and ridge on this thing. This is like any of my toys from my youth. I've played with this thing like crazy. I can tell you about all the wood floors, carpeted floors, the snow, the sand, dirt, everything I've ever played on with this thing, and so many other things in my collection. I can tell you where I came up with a concept for art, when I read a book, all these things. But not until we take the time to slow down and stop and realize where we are in life can we truly be grateful for what things we do have. And I think about that more and more the older I'm getting. I wish it was something I understood when I had been in my 20s. I wish it was something that had been that much more taught, or maybe obvious, or maybe inferred, upon us just growing up. There was that one End of the World film that had Leonardo DiCaprio in it and some other people. I can't remember everyone that was in it, but essentially the earth is going to be destroyed. And at the end of it, they're all sitting around a table, and you can hear the rumbling as literally an extinction level event is about to happen. And I remember thinking to myself, whenever he does that moment where, I don't know if it was him or who it was that said, we really truly had everything we ever needed. I realize that. I do. And it's crazy that, whether it's because of mental health or the rush of life, many of us probably believe that life will always give us that second chance, or that other moment to catch up with somebody. It's not always promised that way. And so, although I know for a fact that, started to tumble over my own words there. I got emotional again for a second. God damn, this is a harder video than I thought it was going to be to record. Because of that fact, even though I struggle many times to, meet up face to face with people, or, get things done on time as I should, I always remind myself that I have to stick to the things I believe in, and that life is more than just grinding through it. I don't know what happens after, 25 or 30. Most people suddenly get into this idea of life is passing me by, or it's not where I wanted to be, or something. At least that's the take I see, especially, scrolling through either TikTok or... It's crazy. If you ever want a window into what people are like at night, go on TikTok and watch the live streams. Just go through that whole thing. It's not to... Certainly not to make fun of people, but to observe, to see what they talk about. I have found some of the most interesting and honest, bluntly honest people that will tell you what they're going through at that time. People that are dealing with cancer, people that are dealing with poverty, people dealing with educational issues, people dealing with mental trauma. That seems to be the majority of them. And sometimes there's people giving them advice. Sometimes there's people being rude. Sometimes there's people just commenting and asking questions. And I think that the thing that rattles my brain the most is, am I the only person feeling either aloof or disconnected? Because the only time that I truly ever really feel safe to be completely connected to people is whenever it happens to be online a lot of times. And that sounds weird, right? But at the same time, I'm very comfortable in admitting that, because although I like meeting people in person and stuff, I think there's that whole aspect of being able to control how many messages, what's going on, interaction, stuff like that online that doesn't really happen otherwise. You know, in real life, you stumble over your words, you fuck up, you're like, oh shit, can't take that back, can't delete that, can't edit that out of the video. So much of my goddamn mind. Anyway, all right. So that's the end of this one. This is a real simple one. Stupid simple. Stupid simple. Jeez, I think it's like 1 degree outside. It's so goddamn cold. I'm glad I got a space heater in this studio, but Jesus. Anyway. Thanks for listening, guys. I'm enjoying, people talking to me about it and everything. That there's been some really great conversations. Let me add a few more minutes onto this real quick. There's been some really cool things, because I started figuring out that I can kind of cross some of what's on here with what's on TikTok and back and forth. And then when I also end up reposting some of the TikTok videos onto this YouTube channel, that's been helping the discourse and conversations go. It really is interesting, though, because I am very grateful for the people that comment. I am surprised. Well, I guess I shouldn't be, because I don't really go that route, but I am really surprised by the people that will go out of their way to find my email and then, message me there, find me on Instagram or something and message me through there. And there's like a ton of messages I haven't gotten to yet, and I feel so shitty about that. Just fucking terrible. But it's interesting, the questions and the comments still have. So I'm really grateful. There's been a few people that have said, hey, I'm going to do something similar like this too. I'm like, that's fucking great. Go, journal, do what you got to do. It'll be a great record for you to look back on. And worst comes to worst, you just delete your whole YouTube account if it's super cringe. So I'm not doing that. God damn it, this is going to stay. I really am jazzed. I don't want this whole fucking year to fly by. Don't get me wrong. I don't want this whole year to fly by. I do want to know what I'm going to be feeling like on December 31st when I sign out for the last time on this playlist. That'll be such a trip. I am really genuinely looking forward to that. I don't know. All right, guys. Thank you again for watching. Catch you in another video. I cry. I'm getting a little teary-eyed right now. A little bit of behind the scenes as I was editing the little bit where I was talking about Soul and the main character becoming the cat. Radar decided to jump up on my lap. This leg is asleep now, but he is comfortable, and that's all that matters here in this editing aspect. Thanks for helping out, buddy. Yes.